This video is based on a true story. So what am I talking about? It's a baby reindeer update, because a lot of you have expressed an interest in that case on the back of a video I did previously. But to save you having to go back and look at that, just to give you an overview in case you don't know it, there was a Netflix drama called Baby Reindeer, and it was the story of a guy who allegedly was stalked by a lady. In the drama, they gave the lady a different name. However, she subsequently came forward and said, yes, this is me. And a lot of what is in that drama is untrue. And she has sued. And she sued Netflix, because they're the people who put the drama out. And she sued for a number of different types of claim, different heads of damage, as we say. She sued for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, gross negligence, misuse of private information, and also a tort that's, cashing in on somebody's image. Netflix applied to strike this out. Now, this is a case that's in the US, but I managed to get hold of the judgment, which is quite a lengthy document, and it's great. The judge goes into a lot of details about the law there. But Netflix applied to strike this entire claim out. Now, a strikeout stroke summary judgment, this was a strikeout, but it had a lot of elements in common with what we call summary judgment here. So the test was, were there any of these claims sort of unsustainable just as a matter of law, but also were they unsustainable on the facts? But the test is that, the same as they do here, they assume that everything the respondent claims factually, in other words, everything that, in this case, because it was Netflix claim, they assume that everything the plaintiff, as they still call them in the US, everything that she said, she could prove, and she could show that was true. And there were quite a few arguments. The problem that they had was that they'd explicitly said at the beginning of the drama, this is a true story. Now, as the judge pointed out, this story had originated actually as a stage play by the guy, but the stage play said based on a true story. And the judge said, by making that explicit statement, you've set yourself a very high bar to prove there. So what was she claiming? She said, well, contrary to what the TV drama suggested, she'd never actually been arrested and convicted, never been tried and convicted of stalking, nor sent to prison. Also that she hadn't sexually abused him, as implied in the programme. I mean, Netflix said, no, if you look at the scene, it doesn't really show that. But the judge says, well, it clearly does. And anyway, for the purposes of this exercise, we assume she can prove that that's what the scene actually showed. They also said, because she is a public figure, then she would have to show that Netflix acted maliciously. Now, what's interesting there is the judge seemed to go along with that and say, we accept she's a public figure, because she had previously stood for political office in Scotland. She argued that she did that privately and confidentially, but the judge said, well, you can't really do that. There's also the elements of, she wasn't actually named in the programme. And they said, well, she outed herself. But the judge said, well, no, because it was very easy to work out who she was, and a lot of people did it. Now, the mere fact that this happens all the time when you don't name people, generally speaking, it's like we call it defamation by innuendo. The test is, might there be some people who could figure out, who would know who you were talking about? And that comes into play when you assess the level of damages and level of harm, because they might say, well, 1 million people saw this, of whom 10,000 would have known who it was. So we basically say, this was a publication to 10,000 people, not 1 million people. But the judge said, you've got all these internet sleuths, it wasn't actually that hard to find her. I mean, that's slightly different to how we'd look at it here. Here we say, you just look at what is the information that's readily available, and that can include like links to other sources. But generally here we say, if you've actually got to go off and do sleuthing, then that doesn't really count, because that's something that's out of your control. You've tried to cover yourself, and you're not responsible for sort of what people who have a particular interest in this do. But they said she counts as a public figure. so you have to show malice. Of course, what she said is, I will be able to show malice because they clearly must have known that this wasn't true, because they've seen the stage play. The fact that they said the stage play was based on true events was a warning to them that not everything in the stage play was actually factual. And the judge said, yeah, that seems like a very reasonable argument. He did, however, he dismissed the negligence and gross negligence claims. He said, well, that's sort of wrapped up in the defamation, because she said the negligence was going ahead with this broadcast knowing it's not true. And they said, notwithstanding there's one case where in a footnote they hint that's a possible head of damage, it's not particularly persuasive, and really it's just duplicating what's in the the defamation aspect. And bear in mind, she's saying they did it intentionally. Then that goes beyond negligence anyway, and so they dismiss the negligence and gross negligence aspects. Also the misuse of private information and cashing in on her image. They said, well, no, because a lot of this is actually true. So you can't stop somebody just broadcasting their version of events. I mean, Netflix tried to argue and said it's clear that this was just his interpretation. The old unreliable narrator thing, as we say, in fiction. But again, like I said, the judge came back and said, no, you've nailed your colours to the mast by saying this is a true story. You've got to prove everything. They also argued that she was what we call libel proof. In other words, her reputation on the facts that were true, it was already so damaged that nothing they could say could make it any worse. The judge, interestingly, referred to an American case where they quoted Benedict Arnold and said, it's clear that Benedict Arnold was a traitor, but that doesn't mean you can go around accusing him of shoplifting. Oh, Coast Guard's out. I'm not that near the water, and I have checked that this is high tide, so I'm not going to get any wetter. So thank you for popping over, but we don't need your assistance. I just found that interesting because, of course, from a UK perspective, what's wrong with Benedict Arnold? he was a proud patriot against all these rebels. But the judge dismissed that because he said saying somebody is a stalker is a lot different from saying somebody is convicted and sentenced to prison for stalking. Now, I'm not sure about that actually, because it's not the consequences, it's the factual, what was her behaviour. What's interesting is they had to call an English lawyer as an expert witness to say that stalking in this country is a crime and can attract a penalty of up to 5 years, just to show how serious that allegation was. Because of course, she's all based in the UK, but she's having to sue in the US because that's where Netflix live. So the upshot of this is that, the strikeout application succeeded in part in that they bumped a lot of stuff out. And just to say, intentional infliction of emotional distress, we don't really have that here, but that's a sort of, it's a sort of a super type of defamation where the defamation is so egregious and so, goes beyond just getting something wrong, that it's not just somebody's got hurt feelings or somebody's being shunned and avoided. I mean, because, some people can get defamed and say, look, this has affected my business and this has affected my dealings with people, but, it's not caused me any psychological harm. It's just annoying and I want it putting right. Intentional infliction of emotional distress is where it goes beyond that and somebody's actually suing for mental distress. I mean, over here, that's all wrapped up in the damages. If defamation is particularly egregious, they can just bump the damages up and say, yeah, not only did you defame them, you caused them psychological harm. But you see that quite a lot in the US. I was going to do some commentary on that Manson case because that actually featured, that was the head of damage in that. And the defamation was the thing that caused the harm. But of course, you've got to show intent there, that you intentionally meant to do it, that in other words you set out to do it, you intended to, it wasn't reckless or negligent behaviour. So that is actually quite a high burden to prove. You would have to show that Netflix sat down and went, wah, let's drive this poor woman, let's just make this woman mad, let's just psychologically harm her. But of course then you get into all the debates about what intent is, because you intend to do something if it's the natural consequences of your voluntary action. So if it's foreseeable, you intend to do it. So that even if they argue, well, we didn't mean to hurt her, they'll say, well, no, but you intentionally did something that would hurt her. Oh, there's a load of swans just turned up here. They can break your arm, So I think that's pretty much covered the actual court case. Like I say, it was very interesting as a lawyer to read it. I think the judge's reasoning was very, very sound, and he's explained his decision-making very well. So what's going to happen now? Well, it's going to go off for, theoretically, it's going to go off for trial. Now, of course, in the US, she's asked for a jury trial. So that would, unlike here, where you can sort of predict what a judge might do, over there you've always got the element of uncertainty because you're not quite sure what a jury would find. I mean, a jury might say, well, it's, you know, all the true stuff is so near that it doesn't really make any difference. I mean, that's the same as here. You don't have to prove that everything is true. You just have to prove that it's substantially true and that the bits that aren't true wouldn't really make any difference. So even though the judge has said, you know, saying somebody was convicted of stalking is worse than stalking, that's just for the purposes of this exercise. It's perfectly open for a jury to say, well, no, we don't think it is. We think that what she did, it doesn't make any difference to her reputation, that she wasn't actually convicted for it because she did it. But this is, most defamation cases here settle after this stage. It's very common here for defamation cases to have what we call, first of all, the meanings hearing as to, you know, what actually does the defamatory statement mean. And as I've said before, it doesn't matter what the claimant says it means or what the defendant says it means. The judge applies the single meaning rule, which is a rule that most defamation people think is a silly rule. And the courts themselves have said if we started defamation from scratch, we'd have no justification for inventing it. But we're stuck with it. So the judge says, what would your average, hypothetical, reasonable person, not too open to scandal but not too naive either, what would they think it meant? So, you know, it seems to me the sting of the defamation is she is a stalker. But, you know, like, does convicted make any difference? Well, that's going to be a matter for the jury. However, will it get to a jury? Because, like I say, usually when you have these preliminary hearings and the judge makes these rulings, over here you'd look at that and go, actually, if this is going to be the same judge at trial, we're a bit stuffed. We may as well go back and make an offer and try and settle this. But it's going to be different because, like I say, there's the vagaries of the jury system over there. So both sides will be sitting down and going, well, you know, what's likely to happen at trial with a jury? I mean, who are they going to be more sympathetic to? Because, you know, she has admitted to some pretty, you know, dodgy behaviour. It might be they say, well, he was entitled to tell his story, and realistically, this is a true story, this is based on a true story. Does it make that much difference? I mean, people have argued before, there's what we call the Tucker Carlson defence, where Fox News ran a defence, which has actually been successful, which is they said no reasonable person takes anything Tucker Carlson says seriously. And it might be they run the same defence. You know, the mere fact that we've said, yeah, this is a true story. Come on, you know, this is Hollywood. Of course, it's not really a true story. You know, just look at that Pearl Harbor film. You know, we always embellish and make things up. And your reasonable, average, hypothetical American juror or American viewer of the programme would also put that allowance into the mix. But I will keep an eye on this story and I will report back if there are any developments. So there you go. As always, hope you found that vaguely useful, vaguely interesting, vaguely accurate. Where am I today? I'm just up at St Clement. It's a little lovely spot on the river. It's quite nice and quiet, apart from everyone driving past me. It is actually, it's just coming to the end of the day, so people are all coming back from work and things. But it's a very nice spot, and for once I've actually timed it while the river is actually high. Oh, all the swans have disappeared. Oh no, they're over there. You can probably see them behind me. But I'll just pan round, give you a little shot of what I am actually looking at, which is, it's quite nice. It's a lovely spot to come and just chill. I quite often come here just to eat chips and read emails and things. But yeah, okay, as always, I've done all the, hope you enjoyed that. I don't do the like and subscribe thing, because if you like it, feel free to do so, but you're under no obligation to, and I'll see you next time.